The entire courtroom erupted in laughter when the judge eyed my stained apron and asked if a waitress really expected to manage millions of dollars. I did not argue. I simply tapped the record button on my phone and let them keep talking. What they did not know was that I used to stand right where their lawyers were standing. The woman who left me everything had predicted this exact humiliation, down to the last detail. My name is Chloe Thomas, and as I stood in the center of the 17th District Court of Travis County, I could feel the weight of every single eye in the room pressing down on my shoulders. The air conditioning was humming a low mechanical drone, but it did not do much to combat the stifling heat of the Texas summer that lingered on everyone's skin. Or perhaps the heat I felt was just the burning humiliation that was currently being orchestrated for the entertainment of the gallery. I was 31 years old. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit that I had purchased from a discount rack 3 years ago. The fabric was a cheap polyester blend that shined awkwardly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom, and the hem of the skirt was beginning to fray ever so slightly. To the people in this room, the high-priced lawyers in their Italian wool, the clerks with their crisp shirts, and my own family in their designer mourning attire, I looked exactly like what they thought I was. I looked like a woman who was out of her depth. I looked like a mistake. I looked down at my hands, resting on the defense table. They were red and raw. The skin on my palms was dry, and there were deep, red indentations wrapping around my wrists. Those marks were fresh. They were the lingering ghosts of the apron strings I had tied too tight at 6 o'clock this morning. I had just come from an 8-hour shift at the diner, smelling faintly of old coffee grounds and bacon grease, a scent that no amount of cheap perfume could fully mask. I had scrubbed my hands in the courthouse bathroom for 10 minutes, but the red lines remained, a brand of my station in life. Judge Randall Keene sat high above me, framed by the seal of the state of Texas. He was a man who enjoyed the sound of his own voice, a man who treated his courtroom less like a hall of justice and more like a personal theater where he was the star performer. He adjusted his glasses, peering down at me over the rim with a look that was somewhere between amusement and disgust. "Miss Thomas," Judge Keene said. His voice boomed, amplified by the microphone, bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. "I have read the motion filed by the plaintiffs, and now I am looking at you." He paused for effect. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was playing to the crowd. "I have to ask," Keene continued, a smirk curling the corner of his lip, "does a waitress brain really have the capacity to process the complexities of a multi-million-dollar estate? Or are we just hoping the numbers magically balance themselves like a check at a diner?" The laughter was immediate. It started from the plaintiff's table, a sharp, cruel sound, and rippled backward into the gallery. It was not a raucous belly laugh. It was worse. It was the polite, sneering chuckle of the upper class, the sound of people who believe they are naturally superior, enjoying the confirmation of their bias. They were laughing at the idea of me. They were laughing at the absurdity of a woman who pours coffee for tips thinking she could manage an investment portfolio. I did not flinch. I did not look down. I did not let a single tear well up in my eye. Instead, I slowly moved my right hand into the pocket of my blazer. My fingers brushed against the cool glass of my smartphone. I felt for the volume button and the distinct tactile ridge of the case. I pressed the screen once, a practiced, subtle motion. Inside my pocket, the voice recorder app was running. The little red waveform was dancing in the darkness, capturing every snicker, every insult, every violation of judicial impartiality. "Keep talking," I thought, keeping my face a mask of bewildered innocence. "Please, Judge Keene, say more. Dig the hole deeper." I looked over at the table to my left. My mother, Gwen, was sitting there. She was the picture of elegant grief, or at least, the performance of it. She wore a black dress that I knew cost $2,000, her hair perfectly coiffed, a single strand of pearls resting against her neck. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the judge, offering a small, sad nod, as if to say, "Yes, Your Honor." It is tragic how deluded my poor daughter is. Next to her sat Trent, my half-brother. Trent was the golden boy. He was 2 years older than me, with the kind of jawline that suggested money and the kind of eyes that suggested he had never heard the word no in his entire life. He was checking his watch. He looked bored. For Trent, this wasn't a family tragedy. It was an administrative hurdle. He wanted the assets. He wanted the liquidity. And I was just a piece of gum stuck to the bottom of his Italian loafer. He caught me looking at him and offered a small, pitying shake of his head, as if he were disappointed in me for dragging this out. Their lawyer, Caleb Rourke, stood up. Rourke was a legend in Travis County, a shark who smelled blood in the water from miles away. He was a large man who used his physical presence to intimidate, and he moved with the confidence of someone who golfed with the judge on weekends. "Your Honor," Rourke said, his voice smooth and rich like caramel, "we do not mean to be cruel to Miss Thomas. We are simply being realistic. The estate of Evelyn Harrow is vast. It involves complex financial instruments, commercial real estate holdings, and charitable trusts. It requires a level of sophistication and experience that—" He paused, turning to gesture at me with an open hand. "That the defendant simply does not possess." Rourke walked back to his table and picked up a large exhibit board. He walked it over to the jury box, though there was no jury today. Only the judge, and then turned it so the entire room could see. It was a photograph. It was a high-resolution image of me, taken just yesterday. I was standing behind the counter at the diner, hair frizzed from the humidity, a smear of ketchup on my sleeve, looking exhausted as I balanced a tray of dirty dishes. I remembered that moment. I remembered the flash. I had thought it was just a tourist taking a picture of the retro decor. "Exhibit A," Rourke announced. "This is the proposed executor in her natural element, serving burgers, wiping tables. Now, there is dignity in all labor, Your Honor. But we have to ask ourselves, is a woman who struggles to keep up with the lunch rush equipped to handle the fiscal responsibility of an 8-figure estate?" The judge chuckled again. "Point taken, Mr. Rourke. The court appreciates the visual aid." My mother put a hand over her mouth, feigning embarrassment on my behalf, but I could see the cold calculation in her eyes. This was their strategy. They didn't need to prove I was a criminal. They didn't need to prove I was malicious. They just needed to paint a picture of me that was so pathetic, so incompetent, that the court would step in to protect the assets for my own good. They were banking on the class prejudice of the court system. They were banking on the fact that a waitress is seen as less intelligent, less capable, and less human than a wealthy heir. And honestly, it was a good strategy. If I were actually who they thought I was, I would be crumbling right now. I would be crying. I would be begging them to stop showing the picture. I would be signing whatever settlement papers they shoved in front of me just to make the humiliation stop. But they didn't know. They didn't know that the waitress brain they were mocking had graduated summa cum laude. They didn't know that the woman in the cheap polyester suit had spent 5 years at Summit and Vale, one of the most prestigious litigation firms on the East Coast. They didn't know that I had drafted motions more complex than Rourke's entire career while I was still an intern. I looked at the photograph Rourke was parading around. I looked at the ketchup stain on my sleeve in the picture. I remembered that shift. I had worked a double because one of the other girls had a sick kid. I was tired in that photo. Yes, but I wasn't stupid. Evelyn Harrow, the woman who had left me everything, the woman whose legacy they were trying to tear apart, had warned me about this. "They will come for you, Chloe," she had told me, sitting on her porch in the hill country, watching the sun set over the scrub oaks. "They won't attack your character first. They will attack your competence. They will try to make you feel small so they can feel big. Let them. I took a deep breath, inhaling the stale air of the courtroom. I forced my posture to remain slumped. Just a fraction. I kept my eyes wide and slightly fearful. I was giving them the show they paid for. "It is simply a matter of stewardship," Rourke continued, sensing he had the room in the palm of his hand. "The family is willing to offer Miss Thomas a generous stipend. We are willing to set up a trust for her, managed by competent professionals. We want to ensure she is taken care of, without burdening her with responsibilities she clearly cannot understand." Generous, the judge mused. That sounds very reasonable to me. Miss Thomas, surely you can see that your family is trying to help you. I remained silent. The recording on my phone ticked past the 5-minute mark. Miss Thomas. The judge's voice grew sharper. He didn't like being ignored by the help. I looked up at him. I let a moment of silence hang in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. I saw Rourke smirk. I saw Trent check his watch again. I saw my mother smooth out an invisible wrinkle on her skirt. They think I am here to beg. I told myself. The thought was cold and hard like a diamond in my mind. They think I'm here to ask for pity. They think I'm going to stammer and apologize for existing. No, I am here to finish this. I was here to expose the rot. I was here to let them put their arrogance on the record. Under penalty of perjury, in a public forum, I was here to gather the ammunition that would not only win this case, but would dismantle their reputations brick by brick. Miss Thomas. Judge Keene slammed his gavel down, the sharp crack startling the room into total silence. I am speaking to you. Stand up. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the linoleum floor with a screech that made everyone wince. I stood up slowly, deliberately. I smoothed the front of my cheap jacket. I let my hands rest on the table. Careful not to hide the red marks from the apron strings, I wanted them to see the marks. I wanted them to remember exactly what a waitress looked like. I asked you a question, Judge Keene said, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing. Why should this court believe you are capable of anything more than taking a drink order? Why should I not grant the plaintiff's motion immediately and relieve you of this burden? Speak up. Defend yourself, if you can. The room held its breath. Rourke was grinning. Trent was leaning back, confident the show was over. They were waiting for the waitress to crumble. I looked Judge Keene dead in the eye. I didn't blink. The fear I had been projecting evaporated, replaced by a steeliness that I had forged in the lecture halls of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and sharpened in the boardrooms of Manhattan. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady, clear, and devoid of the trembling hesitation they expected. You asked about my brain. You asked about my capacity. I paused. I could feel the energy in the room shift, just slightly. It was the feeling of a predator realizing that the rabbit it had cornered was not trembling, but waiting. There is a reason I'm standing here, I said, and it is not the reason you think. The question hung in the air, heavy and electrified. Why would a Harvard lawyer be standing here, dressed like a waitress, letting them mock her? They were about to find out that the apron wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a trap, and they had all just walked right into it. To understand why I stood silent in that courtroom while a judge mocked my intelligence, you have to understand the woman who taught me the power of silence. Her name was Evelyn Harrow. She was not my mother, though she was the only parent I ever truly had. Evelyn was a ghost in the Texas Hill Country. If you drove past her property, all you would see was a rusted gate and a long, winding dirt road disappearing into the scrub oaks and limestone ridges. She did not drive luxury cars, and she did not attend the charity galas where my mother desperately tried to be photographed. Evelyn wore work boots that were older than me and flannel shirts that smelled of cedar and rain, but she owned half the county, a fact she kept buried under layers of shell companies and quiet land trusts. I met her when I was 22 years old. I was a senior in college, competing in the state finals for debate. I was angry back then. My style of argumentation was loud, aggressive, and desperate. I wanted to burn my opponents down because I felt like the world was constantly trying to burn me down. Evelyn was one of the judges. She was the only one who didn't flinch when I slammed my hand on the podium. After the round, she found me sitting on a concrete bench outside the auditorium, smoking a cigarette I didn't actually like, just to calm my shaking hands. She sat down next to me. She didn't say hello. She just looked at my hands. You are loud, she said. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping over pavement. You mistake volume for power. It is a common error. I started to argue, to defend my strategy, but she held up a hand. I am not critiquing your performance. Chloe, you won. I am critiquing your survival instinct. You fight like you are trying to prove you exist. You need to learn to fight like you are the only one who knows the truth. That afternoon, she offered me a deal. It was purely transactional, or so she claimed. She saw what she called a feral legal mind in me. She offered to pay for law school, all of it, tuition, housing, books, living expenses. In exchange, I had to spend my summers working on her ranch, not doing legal work, but fixing fences, clearing brush, and listening. My own family made the decision easy for me. We were not poor. I want to be clear about that. We were not living in a trailer park, scraping by on food stamps. My childhood was defined by a suffocating, beige mediocrity. We lived in a subdivision where every house looked exactly the same, and my mother, Gwen, was terrified that anyone might think we didn't belong there. Gwen was a woman constructed entirely of other people's opinions. To her, I was an accessory. When I brought home straight A's, I was her brilliant daughter. She would parade my report card around her bridge club like a trophy. But the moment I needed something money for a field trip, emotional support after a breakup, or just a mother to listen to me, she would vanish into a migraine or a locked bedroom. Her love was conditional on my ability to make her look good. Then there was Trent, my half-brother. Trent was 33, 2 years older than me, and he had been on the verge of a big break for the last decade. He was handsome in a generic, television commercial sort of way, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Trent viewed the world as a series of get-rich-quick schemes. He had moved from day trading to flipping houses to cryptocurrency, always using other people's money, always crashing and burning, and always blaming the market or bad luck. When I told them I got into Harvard Law, the reaction was telling. We were sitting at the dinner table. Trent was poking at a steak that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Harvard," Trent said, chewing with his mouth open. "That is expensive. Who is paying for it?" "Because Mom and I are leveraging the equity in the house for my new tech incubator concept. We cannot carry you." "I have a scholarship," I said. I didn't mention Evelyn. I knew if I mentioned a wealthy benefactor, Trent would be at her gate within the hour, pitching a startup idea. "Good," Gwen said, pouring herself a second glass of Chardonnay. "Imagine how it will look in the Christmas newsletter. Chloe is at Harvard. That sounds wonderful." She looked at me, her eyes glazing over. "Just make sure you don't turn into one of those frumpy women in pantyhose. You still need to find a husband. Chloe, a degree won't keep you warm at night." That was the extent of their support. They didn't drive me to the airport. They didn't ask what kind of law I wanted to practice. They just calculated the social currency my acceptance letter gave them and moved on. So I went to Cambridge, and I became two different people, to my family. I was vague. I told them school was fine. I told them I was struggling to keep up. I downplayed every achievement. I realized early on that if I told Trent I was top of my class, he would ask for a loan. If I told Gwen I had secured a clerkship with a federal judge, she would ask me to sue her neighbors over a property line dispute. So I let them think I was barely scraping by. I let them think I was mediocre. It was safer that way. But to Evelyn, and to the world of high-stakes litigation, I was a shark. Evelyn was the one who taught me the difference between noise and signal. During those summers in the Texas heat, while we repaired barbed wire fences that cut into my fingers, she lectured me on the philosophy of conflict. Most people cannot stand silence. Evelyn told me once, we were sitting on her porch, drinking iced tea that was so cold it made my teeth ache. "If you stay quiet, Chloe, people will fill the silence with their own insecurities. They will talk to fill the void. And if you let them talk long enough, they will tell you exactly how to destroy them." She also taught me the art of documentation. Evelyn kept journals of everything, not feelings, but facts, weather patterns, cattle prices, conversations with contractors. "Memory is a liar," she said. "Ink is truth. Never enter a room without a way to record what happens. People lie to themselves, but they cannot lie to a timestamp." I took that lesson to heart, at Harvard, and later at Summit and Vail Legal Group. I became known for my preparation. I was the associate who knew the footnotes better than the partners. I was the one who found the smoking gun in the endless boxes of discovery documents. I spent 5 years at Summit and Vale. I rose through the ranks faster than anyone in the firm's history. I handled complex civil litigation, defending assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I wore tailored suits that cost $3,000. I commanded boardrooms. I destroyed opposing counsel with a calmness that terrified them. But when I went home for Christmas, I wore jeans and a sweatshirt. I listened to Trent brag about his latest investment that was definitely going to pay off this time. I listened to Gwen complain that I looked tired and that I should really consider wearing more makeup. I am just a junior associate, Mom. I would lie. Lots of paperwork, not much money yet. Well, Trent would sneer, sipping a craft beer he didn't pay for. Maybe you just don't have the killer instinct. Chloe, business is about aggression. You have always been too soft. I would just smile and drink my water. Silence. Then, 6 months ago, Evelyn called me. Her voice was weak. It sounded like paper tearing. She didn't tell me she was dying, but I knew. I took a leave of absence from the firm telling my colleagues I had a family emergency and flew back to Texas. Evelyn was in her bedroom, looking out the window at the hills she loved. She was small now, the cancer having eaten away the sturdy woman who used to lift hay bales, but her eyes were still sharp, burning with that terrifying intelligence. She didn't want to talk about her will. She didn't want to talk about the cancer. She wanted to talk about me. You have been hiding, she said. It wasn't a question. I have been protecting myself, I answered, sitting by her bedside. From them, she gestured vaguely towards the city, towards where my mother and brother lived. Yes, they would drain me dry if they knew. Evelyn nodded slowly. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was frail, her skin like parchment paper. I have made arrangements, Chloe, complicated arrangements, because I know you are strong enough to handle the money, but I do not know if you are strong enough to handle the hate. I don't care if they hate me, Evelyn. You think you don't, she whispered, but blood is a heavy chain. When I am gone, they will come for what is mine. They will think it should be theirs. And when they realize I gave it to you, they will try to break you. She pulled me closer, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that frightened me. They will drag you into the mud. They will try to humiliate you. There will be a moment. Chloe, inside a courtroom, I can see it as clearly as I see you now. Someone will look at you, and they will laugh. They will call you stupid. They will call you unworthy. I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the Texas heat. What do I do? I asked. Evelyn smiled, a dry, thin expression. You do what I taught you. You let them laugh. You let them think they have won. You let them expose their greed and their arrogance, and you write it all down. She squeezed my hand one last time. Promise me, she rasped. Promise me you won't interrupt them while they are digging their own graves. I promise, I said. Evelyn died 3 days later. She went quietly, in her sleep, just as the sun was coming up over the ridge. I was the one who found her. I was the one who closed her eyes. I called the funeral home. Then I called my mother. Evelyn died, I said. Oh, Gwen said. There was a pause. I could hear the television in the background. Wasn't she that rich woman who paid for your school? Did she leave anything for you? I don't know. I lied. Well, Gwen said, her voice perking up. Trent is struggling right now. If she left you anything, you need to remember that family helps family. We raised you. Chloe, don't forget that. I hung up the phone. I looked at Evelyn's peaceful face. I thought about the notebook stacked in her study. I thought about the recording app on my phone. I didn't know the specifics of the will yet. I didn't know that Evelyn had appointed a specific executor or that she had anticipated Trent's exact reaction. But I knew one thing, the war had started. And my family thought they were fighting an unarmed Waitress. They had no idea they were declaring war on a partner from Summit and Vale. That was the last time I cried. Since that morning, I had been nothing but ice. I returned to my life, or rather, the the version of my life that I allowed them to see. I waited for the probate process to begin. I waited for the reading of the will, and I waited for the laughter that Evelyn had promised me was coming. The silence following Evelyn's death was not peaceful. It was heavy, like a woolen blanket soaked in ice water. There was no grand bedside confession, no cinematic final breath. She simply ceased to be. One moment she was the most formidable woman in Texas, and the next, she was a memory. The doctor listed the cause as cardiac arrest, secondary to her long battle with cancer. It was clinical, it was reasonable, it was painfully ordinary, but the machinery of death is rarely quiet for long. 2 days after the funeral, a small, private affair that my family did not attend because they claimed the drive to the hill country was excessive, I received a call from Howard Lasker. Howard was Evelyn's personal attorney, a man who looked like he had been carved out of the same limestone as the courthouse. He was dry, humorless, and possessed a mind like a steel trap. The reading is scheduled for Thursday at 10 o'clock. Howard told me, "Your mother and brother have been notified. They have confirmed their attendance with remarkable speed." I arrived at Howard's office in downtown Austin 15 minutes early. The waiting room smelled of lemon polish and old leather. I sat in the corner, staring at a painting of a cowboy weathering a storm, trying to keep my breathing steady. I was not nervous about the money. I was nervous about the performance I was about to witness. At 9:55, the elevator doors slid open. Gwen and Trent walked in. They looked like they were walking onto a movie set. Gwen was wearing a black veil, which felt absurdly dramatic for a woman she had met exactly twice in her life. Trent was wearing a suit that was too tight in the shoulders, checking his phone as he walked. "Chloe," Gwen said, swooping in for a hug that involved no actual contact. She smelled of expensive floral perfume. "You look tired. Are you eating?" "You look pale." "I am fine. Mom," I said, stepping back. Trent didn't even look up from his screen. "Sad business," he muttered. "Is the executor here?" "I have a meeting at 1 o'clock with some angel investors. I need to know the timeline on the liquidity event." He wasn't asking about Evelyn. He was asking when the check would clear. We were ushered into the conference room. Howard Lasker sat at the head of a long mahogany table. He did not stand up. He did not offer condolences. He simply opened a thick file folder and adjusted his spectacles. "This is the last will and testament of Evelyn Marie Harrow," Howard announced. His voice was flat, stripping the room of any potential emotion. Trent leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Let's skip the preamble. Mr. Lasker, we know Evelyn was fond of Chloe. We expect there to be some provisions. Just give us the numbers." Howard looked at Trent over the rim of his glasses. The look lasted 3 seconds, long enough to make Trent shift uncomfortably in his chair. Then, Howard began to read. The first few minutes were standard legal boilerplate: debts to be paid, funeral expenses covered. Then came the distribution. "To my acquaintances, Gwen Thomas and Trent Thomas," Howard read. Trent bristled. "Acquaintances. We are family by extension." Howard ignored him. "I leave the sum of $5,000 each. This amount is intended to cover any travel expenses incurred during their visit to my memorial. Furthermore, to Trent Thomas, I leave my collection of Reader's Digest magazines from 1980 to 1990, as I believe he may find the advice within them educational." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the hard drive in Howard's laptop. Trent's face turned a blotchy shade of red. "Is that a joke?" "I assure you, Mr. Thomas, Mrs. Harrow was not known for her comedy." Howard said. He turned the page. "To Chloe Thomas, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes the Harrow Ranch in Gillespie County, the commercial properties in downtown Austin, the diversified stock portfolio, and all liquid assets held in the blind trust. The estimated value of the estate is—" Howard named a number. It was a large number. It was the kind of number that changes lives. It was the kind of number that ruins people. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Gwen's mouth hung slightly open, her eyes darting from Howard to me. doing the mental math. Then, Trent exploded. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor. "No," Trent said. His voice was shaking, not with grief, but with rage. "Absolutely not. This is insane. She was senile. She was out of her mind on pain medication." "Mr. Thomas?" Howard said calmly. "I have video documentation of the signing. Mrs. Harrow was of sound mind." Sound mind. Trent pointed a trembling finger at me. "She was manipulated. Look at her. Chloe has been whispering in that old woman's ear for years, playing the poor, struggling student. It is undue influence. It is elder abuse." I sat perfectly still. I had expected this. Evelyn had told me to expect this. "I never asked her for a dime," I said quietly. "Bull," Trent spat. "You think you can manage this? You work at a diner. Chloe, you drop plates for a living. You have no idea what a portfolio like this requires. You don't have the sophistication. You don't have the experience." Gwen placed a hand on Trent's arm, but her eyes were cold as she looked at me. "Chloe, honey, listen to your brother. This is too much for you. It is dangerous to have this much responsibility when you don't understand the financial world. People will take advantage of you." "Like you are trying to do right now?" I asked. Gwen recoiled, as if I had slapped her. "We are trying to protect you. You are not equipped for this. You are a sweet girl. But you are not capable, not like Trent." Trent straightened his jacket. He had regained his composure, and his face had settled into a mask of smug determination. "We are contesting the will," Trent declared, "on the grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity, and we will be filing an injunction to freeze the assets until the matter is resolved." Howard Lasker closed the folder. "That is your right, Mr. Thomas. However, I must warn you that Mrs. Harrow included a no-contest clause. If you lose the $5,000. "Keep the $5,000, Trent sneered. "We are coming for the whole thing." They stormed out. The door slammed shut, vibrating the frame. I looked at Howard. He looked tired. "It begins," Howard said. "They will file the motion by tomorrow morning. The estate will be frozen. You won't be able to touch a penny of the inheritance until the judge rules. This could take months, years, if they drag it out." "I know," I said. "I can survive. I have my job. I have my savings." Howard frowned. He tapped his finger on the desk. "There is one more thing. Chloe, it is a bit of a complication." My stomach tightened. "What complication?" "The bank that holds the estate's primary accounts," Howard said slowly. "They have flagged some transactions, specifically the tuition payments Evelyn made to Harvard on your behalf years ago, because the plaintiffs are alleging that you manipulated Evelyn into giving you money over a long period. The bank's compliance department has flagged those transfers as potential evidence of the ongoing scheme." I stared at him. So, Howard said. "Because those transfers went into your personal checking account before going to the university. The bank has temporarily frozen your personal accounts as well. It is an administrative hold pending the investigation." The room seemed to spin. "My personal account?" I asked, my voice rising. "That is my money, my wages, my savings. It is commingled funds, according to their preliminary risk assessment," Howard explained apologetically. "We will fight it. I can file a motion to release your personal funds, but given the size of the claim Trent is making, it will take time, at least 30 days, maybe 60. I sat back in the chair. The reality of what was happening crashed down on me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a compliance issue. Trent and his lawyers knew exactly what they were doing. They knew I lived paycheck to paycheck, or at least, that is what I let them believe. They knew I didn't have a safety net. They weren't just freezing the inheritance. They were freezing me. They wanted to starve me out. They wanted me to be unable to pay rent. They wanted me to be unable to buy groceries. They wanted to force me into a position where I would have to crawl to them and sign a settlement just to eat. I thought about my rent, due in 4 days. I thought about the utilities bill sitting on my counter. I thought about the balance in my wallet, $42. I looked at the window, down on the street. I could see Trent and Gwen getting into their car. They were talking animatedly. Trent was laughing. He probably thought he had just checkmated me. He thought he was dealing with a waitress who would panic at the first sign of financial pressure. He thought he was dealing with a sister who would crumble. I stood up. I picked up my purse. File the motion. Howard, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Let them freeze it. Let them freeze everything. Howard looked at me with a spark of interest. You are going to be in a very difficult position. Chloe, you might lose your apartment. I know, I said. I walked to the door. I touched the handle, the cold metal grounding me. They think hunger will make me obedient, I said, looking back at the old lawyer. They forgot that I know how to hunt. I walked out of the office and into the heat of the Texas afternoon. I had no access to my inheritance. I had no access to my savings. I was a Harvard-educated lawyer with $42 to my name and a war to fight. I took my phone out and dialed the number of the diner where I had been working weekends. Hey, it is Chloe, I said when the manager answered. I need more shifts. Put me on the schedule for every morning and every night you have open. Yes, start tomorrow. I hung up. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to work. And every table I wiped, every dollar I earned the hard way, was going to be one more piece of evidence against them. They wanted to paint me as a helpless girl, fine. I would show them exactly how much a girl could endure. The letter from Summit and Vale arrived via courier at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was on heavy, cream-colored bond paper, the kind that feels like fabric between your fingers. The language was polite, professional, and absolutely devastating, because the probate litigation regarding the Harrow estate involved accusations of fraud and financial impropriety, and because the opposing counsel, Trent's hired sharks, had raised a formal complaint regarding optics and potential conflicts of interest, the firm was placing me on an indefinite administrative leave, without pay. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the letter. The sun was streaming through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I had $1,200 in cash hidden in a shoebox. My rent was $1,800, due in 10 days. My checking account was frozen. My savings account was frozen. And now, my salary was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the lamp against the wall. I just folded the letter and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand. This was the squeeze. This was the moment the trap snapped shut. Trent and Gwen knew that legal battles were not won by truth alone. They were won by attrition. They wanted to bleed me until I was so desperate for a gallon of milk that I would sign away a multi-million-dollar legacy for a pittance. I put on my shoes. I walked out of my apartment and down the street to the Juniper and Oak Cafe. Sarah, the owner, was behind the counter, wrestling with a stubborn espresso machine. We had been friends since undergrad, before I went to law school and she went to culinary school. She knew who I was. She knew about Evelyn, but she didn't know the extent of the war I was fighting. I need a job, I said. Sarah looked up, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. You are a high-powered attorney. Chloe, you bill more in an hour than I make in a week. What do you mean, you need a job? I am on leave, I said, keeping my voice steady. My accounts are locked up. Legal trouble with the family. I need cash. Sarah, and I need it today. She looked at me for a long moment. She saw the tension in my jaw, the dark circles under my eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. She didn't ask questions. She just pointed to the back room. Apron is on the hook. Shift starts in 10 minutes. Minimum wage plus tips. Don't break my dishes. And just like that, Chloe Thomas, J.D., became Chloe the waitress. The transition was jarring. For the last 5 years, my working life had been defined by silence, air conditioning, and intellectual combat. Now, it was defined by noise, heat, and physical exhaustion. The cafe was popular. It sat on the edge of the university district, drawing a mix of hungover students and wealthy locals from the nearby Tarrytown neighborhood. The lunch rush was a chaotic ballet of clattering silverware and shouting orders. I learned quickly that physical labor is a different kind of tired. It settles in your lower back and throbs in the arches of your feet. I spent hours on my feet, weaving between tables, balancing trays of avocado toast and oat milk lattes. My pride took a hit every time I had to kneel to wipe up a spilled drink. There is a specific way people look at you when you are serving them food. They don't look at you. They look through you. You are a mechanism of delivery, not a person. You are the hands that bring the coffee, not a human being with a history or a future. Excuse me. A woman in a tennis skirt snapped at me around noon. She held up her cup. This is lukewarm. I specifically asked for extra hot. Is it difficult to follow simple instructions? I looked at the steam rising from the cup. It was clearly hot. I apologize, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Let me remake that for you. Do, she said, turning back to her friend without another glance at me. Honestly, the help these days. I walked back to the kitchen, my hands shaking slightly. I wanted to tell her that I could draft a motion to dismiss that would make her head spin. I wanted to tell her that I understood the tax implications of her husband's offshore accounts better than he did, but I didn't. I steamed the milk, I poured the coffee, I brought it back. Thank you, she said dismissively. She didn't tip. By 2 o'clock, I was drenched in sweat. My hair was falling out of its bun. There was a stain on my apron from a rogue splash of tomato soup. That was when Mrs. Gable walked in. I recognized her immediately. She was one of Gwen's society friends, a woman who treated gossip like a competitive sport. She was wearing an oversized floral dress and enough gold jewelry to anchor a small boat. She sat at a table near the window, ordering an iced tea. I tried to stay in the back. I asked Sarah to take her table, but we were short-staffed, and Sarah was stuck on the register. I took a deep breath. I walked over with the iced tea. Here you go, I said, keeping my voice low, hoping she wouldn't look up. She looked up. Her eyes went wide. She looked at my face, then down at my apron, then back at my face. A slow, cruel smile spread across her lips. Chloe? She asked. Her voice pitched loud enough to turn heads. Chloe Thomas. Is that you? Hello, Mrs. Gable, I said. Oh my heavens, she gasped. Gwen told me you were having some difficulties, but I didn't realize it was this bad. You are working here. It is honest work, I said stiffly. Of course, she said, patting my hand with a touch that felt like ice. It is just so brave of you, to not be ashamed. She reached into her purse. I knew what was coming. I saw the phone. I have to document this, she said, holding the phone up. Just so the girls know we should support local businesses. Smile, dear. Click. I didn't smile. I just stood there, holding the empty tray, while she took a digital souvenir of my poverty. That will be $4, I said. She handed me a $5 bill. Keep the change, honey. You look like you need it. I walked away. I put the bill in the tip jar. I felt sick. The text from Gwen arrived 20 minutes later. Mrs. Gable worked fast. What are you doing? The message read. You are embarrassing the family. I have people calling me asking why my daughter is serving coffee like a common dropout. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I stepped out into the alley behind the kitchen, leaning against the brick wall next to the dumpster. The air smelled of rotting vegetables and exhaust fumes. Hello, Mother, I said. You are self-destructing, Gwen said. Her voice was trembling with that fake, theatrical concern she perfected years ago. Chloe, listen to me. You are ruining your future. Think about the optics. Think about the court case. I am thinking about paying my rent, I said. Since you and Trent froze my bank accounts. We didn't do that, she lied. That was the bank. It is procedure. But listen to me. Chloe, if the judge sees you working as a waitress, do you know what he will think? He won't think you are hardworking. He will think you are desperate. He will think you are exactly what we told him you are, unstable, low-functioning. So I should starve, I asked. No. Gwen sighed. You should be reasonable. Trent wants to help you. He is your brother. He is sick with worry about you. Trent has never been sick with worry about anyone but himself. He has a proposal, Gwen said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Just hear him out. Don't be stubborn. Chloe, pride is expensive. I hung up. I went back inside. I finished my shift. I wiped down the counters. I swept the floor. I counted my tips, $62. It wasn't enough. But it was something. It was clean money. It was money I earned by standing on my own 2 feet, not by waiting for someone to die. When I walked out of the cafe at 7 o'clock, the sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. My phone buzzed again. A text from Trent. I know you are struggling. I can make it stop. Sign a limited power of attorney. Let me manage the estate assets as a trustee. I will release your personal funds immediately and give you a monthly allowance of $5,000. You can quit the waitress gig. You can go back to being a lawyer. Just let the professionals handle the money. An allowance. He was offering me an allowance for my own inheritance. He wanted to turn me into a child. He wanted me to admit that I was incapable, that I needed Big Brother Trent to save me. If I signed that paper, the lawsuit would vanish. The frozen accounts would open. I could go back to my comfortable life. All I had to do was agree that I was stupid. I typed a reply. No. I hit send. I started walking toward the bus stop. My car was out of gas, and I couldn't afford to fill the tank until I got my first full paycheck. As I walked, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. The sensation of being watched. It is a primal instinct, something left over from when we were prey on the savannah. I stopped. I turned around. Across the street, parked in a loading zone, was a nondescript gray sedan. The windows were tinted, but the driver's side window was rolled down just an inch. I saw the glint of a lens, a long lens. Someone was taking pictures of me. They were documenting my walk to the bus stop. They were documenting my uniform, my stained shoes, the fatigue in my posture. It wasn't just Mrs. Gable's gossip. This was a professional. Trent had hired a private investigator. They were building a narrative. They were going to walk into court and say, "Look at her. She is destitute. She is working a menial job. She is living in squalor. How can this woman possibly manage a commercial real estate portfolio? She can't even manage her own life." They were weaponizing my survival. I stood there on the sidewalk, looking at the lens. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide my face. The shame was a hot physical thing rising in my chest. I was a Harvard lawyer. I was a litigator. And here I was, being hunted like an animal. Then, I heard Evelyn's voice in my head, clear as a bell. Let them laugh. Chloe, let them think they see the whole picture. The man who underestimates his opponent is a man who has already lost. I didn't run. I reached into my bag and pulled out a book I had brought with me. It was a dense, leather-bound volume on advanced trust law and fiduciary duties. I held the book against my chest, ensuring the title was facing outward. But then I paused. No, that would be tipping my hand. That would be showing them I was fighting back. I put the book away. Instead, I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin. I looked directly at the car across the street, and I offered a small, tired smile. I turned and walked to the bus stop. Let them take the pictures. Let them have their evidence of my downfall, because what the camera couldn't see was the recording app running on my phone every time Gwen called. What the camera couldn't see was the notebook under my mattress where I was documenting every threat, every coercion attempt, every offer of an allowance. They thought they were gathering evidence to bury me. They didn't realize they were providing the shovel. I got on the bus. I paid my fare with the crumpled bills from the tip jar. I sat in the back, surrounded by tired people coming home from their own long shifts. I closed my eyes and let the vibration of the engine rattle through my bones. I was tired. I was poor. I was being hunted. But I was not broken. Tomorrow, I would go back to the cafe. I would pour the coffee. I would wipe the tables. I would let them sneer. And I would wait for my day in court. Because when that day came, I wasn't going to be the defendant. I was going to be the executioner. The neon sign of the 24-hour diner flickered above me. But I was not there to serve coffee. I was there to meet the only person in Austin I trusted to help me bury my brother. Maya Ellison was sitting in a corner booth, nursing a black coffee. We had gone to law school together, survived the bar exam together, and while I had gone into high-stakes corporate litigation, Maya had chosen the muddy, bloody trenches of probate law. She knew where the bodies were buried because she usually helped dig the graves. I slid into the booth opposite her. I was still wearing my uniform from the cafe, smelling faintly of sanitizer and old grease. Maya was in a crisp navy suit, looking like she had just stepped out of a boardroom. "You look like hell, Chloe," she said. It wasn't an insult. It was a professional assessment. "I feel like hell," I admitted. "But I need you to tell me I am not crazy." I slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It contained copies of the motions Trent's lawyer, Caleb Rourke, had filed. The contest of the will, the freezing of the assets, the motion to remove me as executor due to incompetence. Maya didn't open it immediately. She looked at me, her dark eyes sharp and calculating. "I heard about the scene in court. Waitress brain. Rourke is losing his touch. That is sloppy. He is betting too hard on the judge's bias." "It worked," I said. Keene laughed. The whole room laughed. "Keene is a politician in a robe," Maya said. Finally opening the envelope, she scanned the documents, her eyes darting back and forth. She flipped pages, humming a low, dissonant note. After 5 minutes, she closed the file. "Standard playbook," she said. "They are not trying to win on the law. Chloe, they know they can't. To prove undue influence, they would need to show you isolated Evelyn, controlled her medication, or coerced her. You were in Boston for 90% of the last 5 years. The timeline doesn't fit the narrative. So why file it?" "To bleed you," Maya said flatly. "Look at the procedural requests. They are asking for 10 years of financial records. They want depositions from every doctor Evelyn saw in the last decade. They are flooding the zone. They want to make this so expensive and so slow that you run out of money before we even get to trial. They are banking on the fact that you have bills to pay today, and the inheritance might not unlock for 2 years. They froze my personal accounts, Maya. They knew exactly where to hit." "Of course they did," she said. "It is a siege. They want you to panic. They want you to pick up the phone and say, 'Okay, Trent, give me 50 grand, and I will walk away.'" I took a sip of water. "I am not walking away." "Good," Maya smiled, a predatory expression that made me miss working with her. "Because we are not going to play defense. We are going to counterattack, but we have to be smart. We don't fight on emotion. We fight on process." Maya leaned in. "Did Evelyn see a neurologist?" "Yes," I said. "She had a checkup every 6 months. She was terrified of dementia. Her father had it." "Perfect," Maya said. "We subpoena the records, but we don't just get the notes. We get the raw data, the cognitive assessments, the mini mental state examination scores. If she was scoring 30 out of 30 while Trent claims she was senile, his case crumbles." "I have something better," I said quietly. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Evelyn knew this was coming," I said. "She left a box with Howard Lasker. She called it her insurance policy. I haven't opened it yet because Howard wanted to wait for the right moment. But he gave me the inventory list." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. "Video recordings," I read. "Dated every month for the last 2 years. Each video begins with her reading the day's newspaper to establish the date, followed by a summary of her business decisions for that month. She explains why she sold the stocks, why she bought the land, and explicitly, why she was leaving the money to me." Maya let out a low whistle. "She created a capacity dossier. That is brilliant. It is admissible as evidence of state of mind. If she is on tape, lucid, articulate, and explaining her logic, it destroys the argument that she was being manipulated." "There is more," I continued. "She had 2 independent psychiatrists evaluate her the week before she signed the will. They weren't her regular doctors. They were forensic specialists. They signed affidavits, certifying she was of sound mind and free from duress. Maya leaned back, looking genuinely impressed. Your mentor was a shark. Chloe, this isn't just a defense. It is a trap. If we drop this now, the judge might dismiss the case. No, I said. The word came out harder than I intended. If we drop it now, Rourke will find a way to suppress it or claim the doctors were paid off. I want them to commit. I want Trent to testify under oath that she was crazy. I want him to lie on the record, and then I want to play the tape. Maya looked at me for a long moment. You don't just want to win. You want to destroy him. I want the truth to be the only thing left standing, I said. Okay, Maya nodded. Then we play the long game, but you need to survive the siege. How are you holding up financially? I am working, I said. I am picking up double shifts at Juniper and Oak. Chloe, Maya warned, I can float you a loan, a legitimate one, paperwork and everything. You don't have to scrub tables. It plays into their narrative that you are well, serving class. No, I said firmly. I want the court to see me working. I want the judge to see that when my assets were frozen, I didn't steal, I didn't beg, and I didn't manipulate anyone. I went to work. It goes to character. It shows I value labor, unlike Trent, who has never worked a real day in his life. It is risky, Maya said. Rourke will use it to mock you, again. Let him, I said. Evelyn said to let them laugh. Maya tapped her pen on the table. Fine, but we need to document everything, every text from Gwen, every voicemail from Trent. If they approach you, record it. Texas is a one-party consent state. You don't have to tell them. Way ahead of you, I said, tapping my pocket where my phone lived. The next 3 weeks were a blur of exhaustion and adrenaline. I would wake up at 5 in the morning, work the breakfast shift until 2, meet with Maya, or review case files until 6, and then sometimes go back for the dinner shift. My hands were constantly dry. My feet ached with a deep, bone-weary throb, and I was perpetually tired, but I was also focused. Trent, however, was not idle. He began a whisper campaign. I heard it first from Sarah at the cafe. You know people are talking, right? Sarah asked me one afternoon as we were refilling the sugar containers. Let them talk, I said. No. Chloe? I mean specifically. She hesitated. A girl from your brother's country club came in today. She said Trent is telling everyone you are mentally unstable. He is saying you are cosplaying poverty to get attention. He says you have access to money, but you are choosing to work here to embarrass the family and make him look like a monster. My grip on the glass sugar dispenser tightened until my knuckles turned white. It was a brilliant, twisted lie. By framing my survival as a performance, he stripped me of my dignity. If I was really poor, I was pathetic. If I was faking it, I was manipulative. There was no winning with these people. He is terrified, I told Sarah. He knows that if people respect me, his story falls apart. That evening, Gwen started her bombardment. My phone lit up with message after message. Gwen, Chloe, please, I saw the pictures of you on Facebook. Someone posted you cleaning up a spill. It breaks my heart. Gwen Trent is willing to be the bigger person. He just wants to stop this madness. Just sign the papers. Honey, we can have this all resolved by dinner. I will even help you pay off your student loans. Gwen, why do you hate us? We only want what is best for you. I didn't reply. I screenshotted every message. I uploaded them to a secure cloud server that Maya had set up. The timestamps told a story of harassment, not concern. She wasn't asking how I was. She was asking me to surrender. But the real turning point came on a rainy Tuesday night. I dragged myself home after a 10-hour shift. My apartment building was old, with a flickering light in the hallway that buzzed like an angry hornet. I was fumbling for my keys when I saw it. A plain manila envelope was taped to my door. There was no stamp, no return address, just my name, written in block letters with a black marker. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this a threat? A subpoena. I unlocked the door, rushed inside, and locked it behind me. I threw the envelope on my kitchen table and stared at it for a full minute before I grabbed a knife to slit it open. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. They were printouts of emails. I looked at the dates. They were from 6 months ago, just before Evelyn died. The sender was Trent Thomas. The recipient was Evelyn Harrow. I started reading, and my breath caught in my throat. Subject: urgent investment opportunity. Personal favor, Evelyn. I know we haven't spoken much lately, but I am in a bind. The liquidity for the tech venture hit a snag. I need $500,000 by Friday, or the partners are going to pull out. I can offer you 15% equity. Please, I cannot go to Gwen with this. She thinks the business is already profitable. The next email was dated 2 days later. Subject: urgent. Please, Evelyn, I am begging you. It is not just the business. I leveraged the house. If I don't cover this margin call, I lose everything. You have so much sitting in low-yield bonds. Just a loan. I will pay it back in 6 months. And then, the 3rd page, a reply from Evelyn. Trent, I have reviewed your proposal. It is not an investment. It is a donation to a sinking ship. You have leveraged assets you do not own to fund a lifestyle you cannot afford. I will not give you a penny, not because I do not have it, but because saving you now would only prevent you from learning the lesson you desperately need. Tell your mother the truth. Evelyn. I lowered the papers. My hands were shaking. This changed everything. Trent wasn't contesting the will because he thought I was incompetent. He wasn't fighting for family legacy. He was fighting for his life. He was broke. He had leveraged Gwen's house, our childhood home, and lost the money. If he didn't get control of Evelyn's estate, and soon, the house of cards would collapse. He needed the inheritance to cover his debts before Gwen found out she was homeless. That was why he was so aggressive. That was why he wanted a settlement. He didn't care about the long term. He needed cash immediately. The motive was clear. It was desperation. But who sent me this? Evelyn was dead. Howard Lasker would have given this to me legally during discovery, not taped to my door. Trent certainly didn't send it. I looked at the envelope again. There was nothing, no markings. Someone else was watching. Someone else knew Trent's secret and wanted him to burn. I picked up my phone and dialed Maya. It was 11 at night. Tell me you have good news, she answered, her voice groggy. I have a motive, I said. And I have proof that Trent lied about his financial standing in the initial deposition. What do you have? Emails, I said. He begged Evelyn for money right before she died. She refused. He is underwater. Maya. He isn't protecting the estate. He is trying to loot it to pay off gambling debts. There was a silence on the line, and then I heard the rustle of sheets as Maya sat up. Bring them to me tomorrow, Maya said, her voice sharp and awake. If those are authentic, we don't just have a defense, we have a weapon. I will, I said. I hung up and looked at the papers again. You are not the golden boy. Trent, I whispered to the empty room. You are just a desperate man with a lot of debt. I carefully placed the emails in my own red binder, right next to the photos of me waiting tables. They wanted a war of attrition. They wanted to see who would blink first. I wasn't blinking. I was just getting started. The courtroom air was stale, recycled through vents that hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. But the suffocating pressure in the room had nothing to do with the ventilation. It was the weight of expectation. Everyone in the 17th District Court expected a slaughter. On one side sat Caleb Rourke. He was a man who cost $600 an hour and looked like he was worth every cent. He had a mane of silver hair, a voice that rumbled like a luxury car engine, and a reputation for tearing witnesses apart until they thanked him for the privilege. Beside him sat Trent and Gwen, looking like the victims of a terrible tragedy, dabbing dry eyes with expensive handkerchiefs. On the other side sat me, Chloe Thomas, the waitress. Judge Randall Keene presided over the bench like a king bored with his subjects. He had already made up his mind. I could see it in the way he didn't bother to look at my filings, only glancing occasionally at the clock, as if calculating how soon he could make his tea time. Mr. Rourke, Judge Keene said, waving a hand lazily. You may proceed with your opening arguments regarding the motion for a temporary injunction. Rourke stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He prowled the center of the room. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at the gallery. He looked at the few reporters who had wandered in, sniffing a scandal. Your Honor, Rourke began, his voice filling the room without effort. This case is not about money. It is about protection. It is about stewardship. We are here to save a legacy from being squandered by incompetence. He turned to me then. His eyes were cold. Dead things. Ms. Thomas claims to be the rightful executor of the Harrow estate, a portfolio worth tens of millions of dollars, commercial real estate, venture capital funds, complex derivatives. Rourke paused, letting the silence stretch. And yet, until this morning, Ms. Thomas was scrubbing dried egg yolk off a plate at a diner 3 blocks from here. He walked back to his table and picked up a large, blown-up photograph. It was the one Mrs. Gable had taken, me, in my apron, hair messy, looking exhausted. Exhibit C, Rourke said, holding it up for the judge. This is the defendant. This is the person who claims she can manage a financial empire. Now, I am a simple man, Your Honor, but I have to ask if Ms. Thomas is the legal prodigy she claims to be. Why is she serving coffee for minimum wage? Why is she living in a walk-up apartment that has been cited for code violations? Why is she effectively destitute? Judge Keene peered over his glasses at the photo. He let out a sharp, derisive snort. It is a compelling question, Mr. Rourke, the judge said. It does seem like a rather dramatic fall from grace for a supposed Harvard graduate. Perhaps the diploma was printed on the back of a menu. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It was the sound of my humiliation being ratified by the state. I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded on the table, under the table. My right hand was resting on my pocket, feeling the warmth of my phone. The recording app was running. Laugh. I thought, please, laugh louder. I want the microphone to catch the timbre of your arrogance. Call your first witness, the judge said, still smirking. I call Gwendolyn Thomas, Rourke said. My mother stood up. She walked to the stand with the grace of a martyr walking to the stake. She took the oath, her voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. Mrs. Thomas, Rourke said gently, tell us about your daughter. Tell us about Chloe. Gwen looked at me. Her eyes were wet with fake tears. I love my daughter, she said. I love her so much, but she has always been difficult, impulsive. She has a history of making rash decisions. She rejects our help. She cuts us off. She has this idea that the world is against her, and she refuses to listen to reason. And regarding her finances, Rourke prompted. She has never been good with money, Gwen lied. She spends it as fast as she gets it. She doesn't understand the value of $1. That is why we are so worried. If she gets control of Evelyn's estate, she will destroy it, and she will destroy herself in the process. We just want to protect her from her own hubris. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas, Rourke said. Maya, sitting beside me, scribbled a note on her legal pad and slid it to me. Do not react. They want you to scream. I didn't scream. I stood up when it was my turn to cross-examine. Mrs. Thomas, I said. My voice was cool, detached. You stated that I am impulsive and bad with money. Are you aware that I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law? Are you aware that I worked for 5 years at Summit and Vail, managing litigation for Fortune 500 companies? Gwen sniffed. I know you had a job. Chloe, I also know you lost it, or quit. We don't really know. Do we? You are very secretive, just like you were secretive with Evelyn. Did I ever ask you for money, Mother? I asked. In the last 10 years, did I ever ask you for a single cent? Well, no, Gwen said, looking at the judge. But that is just your stubbornness. It doesn't mean you were solvent. No further questions, I said. I sat down. It wasn't a victory, but I had put it on the record. Then, Rourke called me to the stand. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Rourke buttoned his jacket and walked toward me like a hunter approaching a trapped animal. "Ms. Thomas," he said, "let us dispense with the pleasantries. You are working as a waitress because you have no other options, correct?" "I am working as a waitress because my assets were frozen by your client's motion," I said clearly. "I am working because I pay my own bills. I do not live on credit." I looked directly at Trent when I said that. He flinched, just slightly. "Noble," Rourke mocked. "But let's talk about competence. The Harrow estate includes a diversified portfolio of municipal bonds, high-yield REITs, and private equity stakes. Do you even know what a REIT is, Ms. Thomas, or do you think it is a type of sandwich?" The judge chuckled. "Careful, Mr. Rourke. Don't confuse the witness with the lunch menu." More laughter. I looked at Rourke. I didn't blink. "A real estate investment trust," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room, "is a company that owns, operates, or finances income-generating real estate, modeled after mutual funds. REITs pool the capital of numerous investors. To qualify as a REIT, a company must comply with certain provisions of the Internal Revenue Code. Specifically, it must distribute at least 90% of its taxable income to shareholders annually in the form of dividends." The room went quiet. Rourke blinked. He hadn't expected a textbook definition. I wasn't finished. "Furthermore," I continued, "Evelyn's portfolio is heavily weighted in commercial mortgage-backed securities. Given the current volatility in the office space sector, the prudent strategy would be to divest the Class B properties in downtown Austin and reallocate the capital into industrial logistics centers, which are currently seeing a 6% year-over-year growth in cap rates. That is what I intended to do before you froze the accounts." I stared at Rourke. "Is there any other financial instrument you would like me to define for you, counselor? Or shall we discuss the prudent investor rule and how your client's attempt to delay probate is actually a breach of fiduciary duty, causing active harm to the estate's value?" Maya covered a smile with her hand. Rourke stood there for a second, his mouth slightly open. I had cornered him. I had proven, in 30 seconds, that I knew more about the assets than he did. But I had forgotten where I was. I had forgotten that in Judge Keene's courtroom, intelligence was not an asset if it came from the wrong person. Judge Keene leaned forward. He didn't look impressed. He looked annoyed. He looked like a man who had just been corrected by a servant. "Well," the judge drawled, his voice dripping with condescension, "that is a very pretty speech, Ms. Thomas. You must have memorized that quite thoroughly. Perhaps you read it on Wikipedia during your break." "I learned it at Harvard Law, Your Honor," I said. Right. Keene waved a hand dismissively. "The famous degree. But tell me this, if you are such a financial wizard. Why are you wearing a suit that looks like it came from a garage sale? Why are your hands red from scrubbing tables?" He leaned back, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "You see, Ms. Thomas, there is book smarts, and then there is street smarts. And frankly, looking at you, I have a hard time believing a waitress brain can truly grasp the nuances of multi-generational wealth management. You might know the definitions, but do you have the breeding for it?" "Genius waitress brain," the judge chuckled to himself, as if he had just invented the wittiest joke in history. "Now that is an oxymoron if I ever heard one." The courtroom erupted. Trent was laughing openly now, his head thrown back. Gwen was smiling behind her hand. Rourke was grinning like a shark. They were laughing at my logic. They were laughing at my defense. They were dismissing my education, my experience, and my entire existence because I wore an apron. My hand tightened on the fabric of my skirt. The anger was a physical heat in my chest, a fire that wanted to consume the entire room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the table over. I wanted to pull out the emails proving Trent was a fraud and shove them down the judge's throat. But then I saw Maya. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at me. She held my gaze, and she gave a microscopic shake of her head. Her eyes were hard and clear. "Let them talk." Her eyes said, "Let them dig." I felt the phone in my pocket. It was still recording. Every word, every insult, every prejudiced, biased syllable that fell from Judge Keene's mouth was being captured in high-definition audio. "Waitress brain," I repeated slowly. "Is that your official assessment, Your Honor?" "It is my observation," Keene said, enjoying the crowd's reaction. "And it brings me to my ruling." The laughter died down. The room waited. "Given the complexity of the estate," Keene said, shuffling his papers, "and given the questions regarding the defendant's current stability and lifestyle, I am not comfortable handing over the keys to the kingdom. Not yet." He banged his gavel. "I am granting the plaintiff's motion for a temporary injunction. The assets will remain frozen. Furthermore, I am ordering the appointment of a temporary administrator to oversee the estate until the trial concludes. I am inclined to appoint a family trust committee, headed by Mr. Trent Thomas, to advise on urgent financial decisions." It was a gut punch. He was giving Trent the keys. Not officially, not permanently, but enough. Trent would have oversight. Trent would have access. "But, Your Honor," I stood up, my voice shaking with controlled fury. "Mr. Thomas is a debtor. Giving him access to the estate is—" "Sit down, Ms. Thomas," Keene roared. "Do not lecture me on my rulings. Unless you want to be held in contempt and spend the night in a cell, you will sit down and be quiet. You may be a genius at the diner, but in here, you are just a defendant." I sat down. The gavel banged again. "Court is adjourned." Trent walked past my table. He stopped, just for a second. He leaned down, so close I could smell his expensive cologne masking the scent of his own desperation. "Don't worry, sis," he whispered. "I will make sure to tip you next time I stop by for coffee." He walked away, laughing with Rourke. Gwen followed them, avoiding my eyes. I sat there while the room emptied. I sat there until it was just me and Maya and the bailiff who was looking at me with pity. "He gave them the estate," I said. My voice was hollow. "He gave them a rope," Maya said softly. She began packing up her briefcase. "He just put a man with massive gambling debts in charge of a multi-million-dollar cookie jar, and he did it on the record, after mocking the actual executor based on class prejudice." Maya looked at me. "Do you have the recording?" I pulled the phone out of my pocket. I stopped the recording. The file saved. 2 hours and 14 minutes of pure, unfiltered judicial misconduct. "I have it," I said. "Good," Maya said. "Because Judge Keene just made the biggest mistake of his career. He thought he was crushing a waitress. He didn't realize he was handing a loaded gun to a litigator." I stood up. The red marks on my wrists from the apron strings were throbbing. "I am going to destroy him," I said. "Not just Trent. The judge, Rourke, all of them." "We will," Maya said. "But first, we let them get comfortable. We let Trent think he has won. We let him put his hand in the jar." I looked at the empty judge's bench. The seal of Texas hung above it, silent and imposing. "They wanted a waitress," I said, turning to leave. "I am going to serve them a meal they will choke on." The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung shut behind us, muting the buzz of the gallery. But the silence in the hallway was far more violent. It was the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. The recess was supposed to be 15 minutes, just enough time for the judge to grab a coffee and for my family to corner me. Gwen moved first. She didn't look like a grieving mother anymore. The mask of the concerned matriarch she had worn inside the courtroom vanished, replaced by the sharp, brittle impatience I remembered from my childhood. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of my cheap suit jacket. "This has to stop," Gwen hissed. Her voice was low, vibrating with embarrassment. "Did you hear them laughing? Did you hear what the judge said? You are making a fool of yourself, Chloe. And worse, you are dragging our name through the mud." Trent stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the water fountain. He held a document in his hand, a crisp, blue-backed settlement agreement. He must have had it printed and ready in his briefcase the entire time. "It is over, Chloe," Trent said. He didn't look angry. He looked triumphant. It was the look of a man who had just watched his opponent fold a winning hand because they didn't know the rules of the game. Keene is going to appoint the trust committee. That is me. That is us. You heard him? He thinks you are a joke. He slapped the paper against his palm. Sign the temporary delegation of authority, Trent commanded. Right now, we go back in there. We tell the judge we have reached an amicable interim agreement, and we stop the bleeding. I will release $5,000 to your account today. You can pay your rent. You can buy some decent clothes. You can stop playing Waitress. I looked at the paper, then I looked at Trent. And if I don't? I asked. Then we crush you, Trent said simply. We drag this out for 2 years. We depose every manager you have ever had. We bring up every mistake you made in high school. By the time we are done, you won't just be broke. You will be unemployable. He leaned closer, invading my personal space. Face it, Chloe, you are a coffee girl. You wipe tables. You think anyone in that room is going to believe you can manage a hedge fund. You think anyone is going to trust you over me. The air in the hallway seemed to stand still. I looked at my brother. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip, the slight tremor in his hand that he was trying to hide. I saw the desperation I had read in his emails to Evelyn. He wasn't a titan of industry. He was a frightened little boy in a suit he couldn't afford. You asked me a question, I said softly. What? Trent snapped. You asked if anyone would trust me. I said, but that isn't the real question, is it, Trent? The question isn't who trusts me. The question is who has been told to trust me. Trent frowned. What are you talking about? You are babbling. I reached into my purse. I didn't reach for my phone this time. I reached for my wallet. It was an old leather thing, battered and worn, but the contents were pristine. I pulled out a small, laminated card. I held it up, right at Trent's eye level. It was my State Bar of Texas identification card. Next to it, I held up a second card, my security clearance badge for the federal courthouse in the Southern District of New York, issued during my time at Summit and Vail. Read it, I said. Trent stared at the card. He blinked. He squinted. Chloe Thomas, he read, his voice faltering. Attorney at law, active status, admitted. He stopped. He looked at the date. Admitted 5 years ago. I finished for him. I turned to Gwen. She was staring at the cards as if they were radioactive. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the ID to my face, trying to reconcile the image of her failure daughter with the reality of the credential in front of her. You, Gwen stammered. You went to law school, but you said you were struggling. I said school was hard, I corrected her. I never said I was failing. I graduated top 5% of my class. Mother, I was an editor on the law review, and while you were busy telling your friends I was finding myself, I was litigating asset forfeiture cases worth more than Trent's entire imaginary portfolio. Trent took a step back. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like he might faint. You are a lawyer, he whispered. A real lawyer. Not just a lawyer, I said, tucking the cards back into my wallet. I am a litigator. My specialty is complex civil fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, which means, Trent, I know exactly what a leveraged margin call looks like. Trent flinched. The reference to his debt hit him like a physical blow. You set us up, he accused, his voice rising to a high, panic-stricken pitch. You hid this. You lied to the family. I didn't hide anything, I said, my voice cold and steady. I just stopped explaining myself to people who only hear what they want to hear. You wanted a waitress to look down on. I gave you one. You wanted to believe I was stupid because it made you feel smart. I let you. But I never lied. Trent, you just never asked. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors. All rise. Judge Keene is returning. Wait. Gwen grabbed my arm again, desperate now. Chloe, wait. We can talk about this. We don't have to go back in there yet. Let's just figure this out. I pulled my arm away from her grip. No, I said. We are done talking. Now, I am going to work. I turned and walked back into the courtroom. The atmosphere inside had not changed. It was still relaxed, jovial even. Rourke was laughing at something his paralegal had said. The gallery was checking their phones. They thought the show was over. They thought the waitress had been put in her place. I walked to the defense table. Maya was there, her face unreadable, but I saw the spark in her eyes. She knew. Judge Keene swept in, his robes billowing. He sat down and picked up his gavel, looking bored. "All right," Keene said. "Let us finalize the order for the temporary administrator. Unless there are any final housekeeping matters." Rourke half rose from his chair. "Nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor. We have a draft order prepared for your signature. Ms. Thomas?" Keene looked at me, his eyes sliding over me as if I were a piece of furniture. "I assume you have no objections that are legally grounded." I stood up. I didn't slump my shoulders this time. I didn't hide my hands. I buttoned my cheap blazer, straightened my spine, and projected my voice from the diaphragm, just as I had done in the Federal Circuit Courts of Manhattan. "Actually, Your Honor," I said, "I have a motion to introduce regarding the court's finding of competence." Judge Keene sighed, a long, exaggerated sound. "Ms. Thomas, we have been over this. I have made my ruling. Do not test my patience with layperson ramblings." "This is not a layperson rambling," I said, "and it is not a request. It is a disclosure of material fact regarding the qualifications of the executor." I walked around the table. I moved to the center of the room. I moved like a shark. Throughout these proceedings, the court and the plaintiff have operated under the assumption that I lack the requisite sophistication to manage the Harrow estate. This assumption has been based entirely on my current employment in the service industry. "We are aware of your job, Ms. Thomas," Keene snapped. "Get to the point." "The point, Your Honor, is that employment history is not the sole metric of capability. And since Mr. Rourke was so fond of Exhibit C, the photograph of me in an apron I would like to submit. Exhibit D." I signaled to Maya. Maya stood up and handed a folder to the bailiff. The bailiff walked it up to the bench. Rourke looked confused. He craned his neck to see what it was. Judge Keene opened the folder. I watched his face. I watched the boredom vanish, replaced by a frown of confusion, and then a sudden, sharp stillness. "What is this?" Keene asked. "That," I said, "is a certified copy of my Juris Doctor from Harvard Law School. Behind it is my active license to practice law in the state of Texas, and behind that is a curriculum vitae detailing 5 years of employment as a senior associate at Summit and Vale Legal Group, specializing in high-value probate and trust litigation." The silence that fell over the courtroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. Rourke scrambled for the copy the bailiff had dropped on his table. I saw him read it. I saw his jaw literally drop. He looked at Trent. Trent was staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "You." Judge Keene looked at me, then at the paper, then back at me. "You are an attorney." "I am," I said, "and more specifically, Your Honor, I am an attorney who has successfully argued cases involving the exact financial instruments Mr. Rourke claimed I could not define." I took a step closer to the bench. "So, the question of my waitress brain is no longer a matter of speculation. It is a matter of record. The premise of the plaintiff's argument that I am incompetent due to a lack of education or experience is demonstrably false. It is a lie, and they knew it." "Objection," Rourke shouted, standing up. "We did not know the defendant concealed her credentials." "I was under no legal obligation to provide a resume to my brother," I shot back, pivoting to face Rourke. "The burden of proof was on you to prove incompetence. You chose to rely on a photograph and a stereotype instead of doing your due diligence. That is malpractice. Mr. Rourke, not concealment." Rourke sat down slowly. He knew he was beaten on that point, but I wasn't done. I turned back to the judge. This was the moment. The mask was off. The credentials were on the table, but the true weapon was still in my pocket. "However," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious, "the issue today is no longer just about my competence. It is about the proceedings of this court. Judge Keene narrowed his eyes. Tread carefully, counselor. I am treading very carefully, Your Honor, because during this hearing, the court made several statements regarding my intelligence, my background, and my breeding based solely on my appearance and my temporary job. I paused. I let the memory of his laughter fill the room. Statements like waitress brain. Statements implying that service workers are inherently less intelligent. Statements that mock the very citizens this court is sworn to serve. I was making a point, Keene said, his face flushing red. It was judicial rhetoric. It was bias, I corrected him. And unfortunately for the record, Your Honor, it was preserved. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I held it up, the black screen reflecting the fluorescent lights. I have a recording, I announced. The room gasped, a collective, sharp intake of breath. Under Texas law, I am a party to this conversation. I recorded the entirety of today's proceedings. I have a high-definition audio file of every joke, every sneer, and every instance where this court prejudged the case based on class prejudice rather than legal merit. Judge Keene froze. He looked at the phone in my hand as if it were a grenade with the pin pulled out. You recorded in my chambers, Keene demanded, his voice shaking. In open court, Your Honor, I said, where there is no expectation of privacy and where judicial conduct is subject to review. I lowered the phone, but I didn't put it away. Now, I said, I am prepared to file a motion for recusal based on verified bias. I am also prepared to submit this recording to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, because if a Harvard lawyer can be treated with this level of disdain simply because she wears an apron, I shudder to think how this court treats a defendant who actually has no other options. The courtroom was frozen. The clerk had stopped typing. The bailiff was staring at the judge. Rourke looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. This wasn't just a probate case anymore. I had just put the judge's career on the chopping block. So, I said, breaking the silence, I suggest we take a recess, a real one. Before this court makes a ruling it cannot unmake. Judge Keene stared at me. His face was a mask of fury and fear. He knew I had him. He knew that if that tape got out, if the media heard a sitting judge mocking a waitress who turned out to be a legal prodigy, he would be finished. Recess, Keene croaked. He banged the gavel so hard it sounded like a gunshot. Chambers, now, he stormed out. I stood there in the center of the room. I felt the adrenaline humming in my veins. Gwen was sobbing quietly in the front row. Trent was pale, staring at the empty judge's chair. Maya stood up and walked over to me. She didn't smile. She didn't high-five me. She just leaned in and whispered, "You didn't just twist the knife," Maya said. "You broke the handle off." "I told you," I said, looking at my family. "I came here to finish it. The war wasn't over, but the battle for respect, I had just won that in a landslide. And now, I was going to make sure the truth had a very expensive price tag." The doors to the judge's chambers remained firmly shut for 45 minutes. In the legal world, a delay that long during a procedural hearing is an eternity. It is the silence of a system frantically trying to repair a breach in its own hull. I sat at the defense table, my back straight, my hands resting on the cool wood. The gallery was buzzing with whispered rumors, but I tuned them out. Beside me, Maya was typing furiously on her laptop, the click-clack of the keys, the only sound penetrating my focus. She wasn't just taking notes. She was drafting a formal motion for recusal. "We do not leak this," I said quietly, leaning in so only Maya could hear. "I know the internet would love the audio of a judge mocking a waitress, but if we put it on social media, we look like we are trying to try the case in the court of public opinion. Rourke will claim we are tainting the jury pool, even if there isn't a jury yet." Maya stopped typing and nodded. "Agreed. We keep it clean. We file it with the clerk. We submit a copy to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. We follow the procedure to the letter. That way, when Keene falls, he cannot say he was pushed by a mob. He will have been pushed by the law." She hit a final key with a decisive snap. "Done," Maya said. I am sending it to the printer in the clerk's office now. We are citing Canon 3 of the Texas Code of Judicial Conduct regarding bias and prejudice. We are attaching the transcript of your recording as Exhibit A. I watched the clerk's printer in the corner of the courtroom whir to life. The bailiff walked over, picked up the hot pages, and looked at them. His eyes widened. He glanced at me, then at the closed door of the judge's chambers, and then he walked the documents inside. Across the aisle, the mood had shifted from arrogant celebration to frantic damage control. Caleb Rourke was no longer laughing. He was huddled with Trent and Gwen, his face a mask of tight, controlled anger. He was whispering aggressively, his hand chopping the air. Trent looked pale. He kept glancing at the door where the judge had disappeared, as if praying for Keene to come back out and save him. Gwen was just staring at her hands, twisting a diamond ring around her finger, over and over again. They are scared, Maya observed. Rourke knows he just sat there and let a judge commit reversible error without objecting. It makes him look incompetent. It gets worse, I said. Look at Rourke's phone. He's checking his email. He is looking for an exit strategy. But Maya wasn't looking at Rourke anymore. She was looking at her own screen. Her brow furrowed in concentration. She had opened a new browser tab and was scrolling through a website with a dark blue banner. Chloe, Maya whispered. Her voice had a strange edge to it. I need you to look at this. I slid my chair closer. What is it? I was looking into Trent's philanthropic endeavors, Maya said. Remember how he told the local paper he was going to be a pillar of the community once the inheritance settled? He made a big show of pledging a donation to a local nonprofit last week. He wanted to look like a benevolent heir. I remember, I said. He pledged $50,000 to the Travis County Arts and Heritage Foundation, money he doesn't have. Right, Maya said. But look who sits on the board of directors for the Travis County Arts and Heritage Foundation. She pointed to a name halfway down the list. Patricia Keene. I felt a cold chill run through my veins. Keene, I repeated. As in Judge Randall Keene's wife. Maya confirmed. She is the treasurer. Trent pledged $50,000 to a charity managed by the wife of the judge presiding over his case, and he did it a week before the hearing. I sat back, the implications crashing over me like a wave. This wasn't just bias anymore. This wasn't just a judge making a bad joke about a waitress. This was the appearance of a bribe. Whether money had actually changed hands or not didn't matter. Trent had publicly promised a massive donation to an organization that directly benefited the judge's household, while asking that same judge to hand him control of the estate. That is a conflict of interest, I said, my voice barely a whisper. A massive, undisclosed conflict. Keene should have recused himself the moment the case was assigned. He didn't think anyone would check, Maya said, her eyes gleaming. He thought you were just a waitress. He thought Rourke would steamroll you. The case would be over in a month, and the donation would come through quietly. I looked over at Trent. He wasn't just a desperate debtor anymore. He was a man who had potentially attempted to influence the judiciary. Print it, I told Maya. Print the board member list. Print the press release of Trent's pledge. We are adding an addendum to the motion. The printer whirred again. This time, when the bailiff took the papers, I saw Rourke watching. He saw the header on the page, Travis County Arts and Heritage Foundation. Rourke's face went from angry to terrified in a split second. He was a shark, yes, but he was a shark who wanted to keep his license. Being associated with a bribery scandal was a career ender. Rourke grabbed Trent's arm. I could hear his voice hiss across the aisle, loud enough to carry in the silent room. You didn't tell me, Rourke snarled. Tell you what? Trent stammered. The wife, Rourke whispered, pointing at the paper the bailiff was holding. You pledged money to the judge's wife's charity. Are you insane? That is ex parte influence. That is a felony if they can prove intent. I just wanted to look good, Trent said, his voice cracking. I didn't think. That is the problem. Trent, Rourke said, pulling his arm away as if Trent were contagious. You didn't think. and now you have dragged me into a radioactive waste dump." Rourke stood up. He walked a few paces away from the table, putting physical distance between himself and his client. It was a subtle move, but in the language of the courtroom, it was a scream. He was preparing to jump ship. The door to the chambers opened. Judge Keene walked out. He did not look like the arrogant king who had entered earlier. He looked gray. His shoulders were slumped. He wasn't wearing his glasses. He looked like a man who had just been screamed at by his own preservation instinct. He climbed the steps to the bench, but he didn't sit down. He stood there, hovering over the chair he no longer deserved. "All rise," the bailiff said, but his voice lacked the usual authority. "Be seated," Keene said. His voice was tight, clipped. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Rourke. He stared at a spot on the back wall. "The court is in receipt of the defendant's motion," Keene began. "And while this court maintains that its earlier comments were merely colloquialisms intended to clarify the defendant's position, I am aware that the perception of impartiality is paramount to the judicial process." He took a breath. He was fighting to keep his dignity, but it was already gone. "Furthermore," Keene continued, rushing the words now, "it has come to my attention that there may be a tangential connection between the plaintiff and a charitable organization with which a member of my family is affiliated. Although this connection had no bearing on my rulings, in the interest of absolute transparency, I am recusing myself from this matter effective immediately." The gallery erupted. Reporters were typing furiously on their phones. "This case is hereby transferred to the docket of Judge Alana Reyes for all future proceedings," Keene said. "The temporary injunction remains in place until reviewed by the new presiding judge. Court is adjourned." He banged the gavel once, a weak, hollow sound, and virtually ran out of the room. It was over. We had knocked the king off the board. Maya let out a long breath. "He ran," she said. "He ran before we could file the ethics complaint formally. He is hoping that if he quits, we will drop the investigation." "We won't," I said. "Evelyn wouldn't want us to." I began packing my bag. My hands were steady now. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I felt a presence beside me. I turned to see Gwen standing there. Her eyes were red, her mascara smeared. She didn't look like the society woman who judged my shoes. She looked old. "Chloe," she said. Her voice was a broken whimper. "Mother," I acknowledged her, not stopping my packing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through her foundation. "You just destroyed a judge. You humiliated your brother. Everyone is going to know. The papers, they are going to write about us. They are going to write the truth," I said. "The truth?" Gwen grabbed my hand. Her palms were clammy. "The truth is that you are vindictive. You are tearing this family apart for money. Is that what Evelyn taught you? To hate your own blood?" I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. "Evelyn taught me that family is about how you treat people, not whose DNA you share," I said. "And as for tearing the family apart, I didn't make Trent leverage your house. I didn't make him bribe a judge. I didn't make him lie." "He is your brother," Gwen cried out, causing a few lingering people to turn and look. "He made a mistake. He is desperate. If you expose him, he goes to jail. Is that what you want? Do you want to see your brother in handcuffs? Think about our honor. Chloe, think about the family name." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me scrub tables for weeks and felt nothing but shame, not for my struggle, but for how it reflected on her. "Honor," I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. "Yes, honor," Gwen pleaded. "Please, Chloe, drop the motion. Let him settle. Save our reputation." I zipped up my bag. I slung it over my shoulder. I looked my mother in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a parent. I saw a stranger who had simply been present while I grew up. "Mother," I said, "you have it backwards. Honor is not destroyed by the truth. It is destroyed by the behavior you are trying to hide, the shame you feel right now. That isn't me." That is the bill coming due for 30 years of pretending you were better than everyone else. Gwen recoiled, as if I had physically struck her. I walked past her. Trent was standing by the exit. He looked shell-shocked. Rourke was already gone. He had likely sprinted to his car to call his malpractice carrier. Trent looked at me. His eyes were dark, filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something sharper, hate. "You think you won," Trent whispered as I passed him. "I think I just found a new judge," I said. "One who won't care about your charity pledges." "Judge Reyes," Trent said. He tested the name on his tongue. Then, a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. It wasn't the smile of a winner, but it was the smile of a man who had one last grenade in his pocket and was ready to pull the pin. "You really should have taken the settlement, Chloe," he said, "because you don't know what I found in Evelyn's house. You don't know who I found." I stopped. "What are you talking about?" "You will see," Trent said. "Judge Reyes likes witnesses, real, emotional witnesses, and I found one who is going to break your heart." He pushed past me and walked out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the Texas afternoon. I stood there for a moment, the chill of the air conditioning settling on my skin. "He is bluffing," Maya said, coming up beside me. "He has nothing. We have the medical records. We have the videos. We have the law." "He isn't bluffing," I said, watching the door swing shut. "I know that look. That is the look of a rat that found a new hole." "Who could he possibly have?" Maya asked. "Evelyn was a recluse. She had no family besides you." "I don't know," I said. "But we are going to find out." I walked out of the courthouse. The sun hit my face, but it didn't feel warm. The victory with Judge Keene felt hollow now. I had won the skirmish. But the war had just shifted to new ground. Judge Alana Reyes. I knew her reputation. She was strict, fair, and obsessed with the moral character of the parties involved. She didn't care about loopholes. She cared about the human element. If Trent had found someone a witness who could attack my character, or Evelyn's intentions on a personal level, then all the medical records in the world might not save me. I took out my phone. I had a shift at the cafe in 2 hours. "Are you still going in?" Maya asked, incredulous. "You just took down a judge. Go home. Rest." "No," I said, putting my sunglasses on. "I am going to work, because until the gavel bangs for the last time, I am still just a waitress fighting for her life, and I have tables to turn." I started walking toward the bus stop. The fight was far from over, and if Trent wanted to play dirty, he was about to learn that mud wrestling was a lot harder when your opponent knew how to hold their breath. The air in the courtroom of Judge Alana Reyes was different. If Judge Keene's courtroom had been a circus, this was a sterile operating theater. There was no gallery of gossip-hungry spectators, no laughing clerks, and absolutely no tolerance for theatrics. The wood paneling seemed darker here, the lights starker. Judge Reyes sat behind the bench like a statue carved from granite, her eyes scanning the files with a terrifying, silent efficiency. She did not smile. She did not joke. She simply worked. I sat next to Maya, my hands folded on the table. My family sat across the aisle. They looked smaller today. Trent was hunching forward, his expensive suit looking like a costume he had worn too long. Gwen was pale, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. They missed Judge Keene. They missed the bias. Now, they were facing the raw, cold machinery of the law, and they were terrified. "Mr. Rourke has withdrawn from this case," Judge Reyes announced, her voice crisp and dry. "Mr. Sterling, you are now representing the plaintiffs." A young, nervous-looking lawyer stood up next to Trent. "Yes, Your Honor, we are ready to proceed." "Good," Reyes said. "I have reviewed the files transferred from the previous court. I have seen the allegations of undue influence and lack of capacity. I have also noted the irregularities in the previous hearings. We will not be repeating those mistakes. Call your witness." Trent leaned over and whispered something to Sterling. Sterling nodded and cleared his throat. "We call Martha Higgins to the stand." This was Trent's bombshell. The witness he had threatened me with in the hallway. Martha Higgins walked in. She was a woman in her 60s, wearing a floral dress that had seen better days. I recognized her immediately. She had been a relief caretaker for Evelyn, someone who came in on weekends to help with cooking and cleaning about 2 years ago. She took the oath. "Mrs. Higgins," Sterling began, trying to project confidence. "You spent time with Evelyn Harrow in her final years, correct?" "I did," Martha said, gripping her purse. "I was there every Saturday for 6 months." "And did you observe the defendant, Chloe Thomas, interacting with Mrs. Harrow?" "I did." Martha nodded vigorously. "She was always there, always whispering. She would take Mrs. Harrow into the study and close the door, and when they came out, Mrs. Harrow would look tired, confused. I heard Chloe telling her she needed to sign papers, pushing her." Trent looked at me with a smirk. It was a weak smirk, but it was there. He thought this proved coercion. "Thank you," Sterling said. "No further questions." Maya stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She just stood at our table, looking at a single sheet of paper. "Mrs. Higgins," Maya said pleasantly, "you stated you worked for Mrs. Harrow for 6 months. Could you clarify the dates of your employment?" Martha blinked. "Well, it was 2 years ago, roughly." "According to the payroll records," Maya said, "you were employed from January to June of 2 years ago. Is that correct?" "That sounds right," Martha admitted. "And are you aware," Maya continued, her voice hardening, "that the last will and testament of Evelyn Harrow was drafted and signed in November of last year, 18 months after you were fired for theft?" The room went deadly silent. Martha's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I wasn't fired," she stammered. "We parted ways." "We have the police report regarding the missing silver," Maya said, holding up a document. "And more importantly, you were not present in the house, or even in the state, when the will was discussed, drafted, or signed. You have no personal knowledge of Evelyn Harrow's state of mind during the relevant period. Is that correct?" "I know what I saw back then," Martha cried out, looking at Trent for help. "You saw a granddaughter helping her grandmother with paperwork," Maya said dismissively. "Move to strike the testimony as irrelevant and prejudicial." "Sustained," Judge Reyes said immediately. "Witness is dismissed. Mr. Sterling, if you have no actual evidence, do not waste my time." Trent's face turned a sick shade of gray. His ace in the hole had just been revealed as a joker. "Your Honor," I said, standing up, "the defense would like to present its case regarding capacity. We do not rely on the memories of disgruntled employees. We rely on the decedent herself." I walked to the center of the room. I placed a flash drive on the clerk's desk. "Exhibit F," I announced. "The Harrow Capacity Dossier." The large screen on the courtroom wall flickered to life, and there she was, Evelyn. She was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, the Texas sunlight framing her silver hair. She looked thin, frail even, but her eyes, those steel-blue eyes, were blazing with intelligence. She held up a copy of the Austin American-Statesman. "Today is November 14th. Evelyn's voice filled the room. It was strong, clear, and utterly commanding. "I am recording this statement to accompany the signing of my will. I am of sound mind. I am not under duress, and I am about to make decisions that I know will cause friction." In the courtroom, Gwen let out a small, strangled sob. Seeing Evelyn alive, speaking from the grave, was a ghost story come to life. On the screen, Evelyn leaned into the camera. "I am leaving the bulk of my estate to Chloe Thomas, not because she is family, but because she is capable. She has the discipline, the intellect, and the moral compass to manage this legacy. My nephew, Trent, and his mother, Gwen, will receive a nominal sum." Evelyn paused, and her expression hardened. "I know they will be angry. I know they will likely try to challenge this. They will claim I was old. They will claim I was crazy. They will claim Chloe tricked me. Let me be clear. Chloe Thomas never asked for a dime. In fact, she tried to talk me out of it. She wanted me to leave it to charity. but I am choosing her. The video cut to a new scene. Evelyn was sitting with two doctors. They were asking her complex questions about her assets, her family history, and current events. She answered every single one with precision and wit. She listed her stock holdings. She explained the tax implications of her land trusts. She ran circles around the psychiatrists. "This is not the mind of a confused woman," Judge Reyes murmured, almost to herself. The video ended. The screen went black. "That video," I said to the room, "was filmed 1 hour before the will was signed. It was witnessed by 3 independent notaries and 2 forensic psychiatrists." I turned to Trent. There was no whispering behind closed doors. "Trent, there was only clarity." Judge Reyes looked down at the file in front of her. She flipped a page. Then she stopped. She read something, and her eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Sterling?" Judge Reyes said. Her voice was dangerously soft. "Are your clients aware of Article 9, Section 4 of the will?" Sterling looked through his papers, confused. "I believe so, Your Honor. The standard clauses." "It is not standard," Reyes said. "It is an in terrorem clause, a no-contest clause, but it is aggressive." She looked up at Trent and Gwen. "The clause states that if any beneficiary challenges the validity of this will, and if that challenge is found to be without merit, said beneficiary shall forfeit any and all gifts bequeathed to them. That includes the $5,000. But it goes further." Reyes adjusted her glasses. "It stipulates that in the event of a failed challenge, the challenging party shall be personally liable for all legal fees, court costs, and administrative expenses incurred by the estate during the defense of the will. Furthermore, they must reimburse the estate for any loss of value caused by the freezing of assets." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. "Reimburse," Gwen whispered. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, turning to face my mother, "that you don't just lose the $5,000. It means you pay for my lawyers, you pay for the expert witnesses, you pay for the court's time, and you pay for the 6% growth the portfolio lost while you had it frozen." I did the math in my head. "Currently," I said, looking at Trent, "that bill is roughly $150,000. And climbing?" Trent looked like he had been shot in the chest. He grabbed the table to steady himself. They had thought this was a free roll of the dice. They thought that if they sued and lost, they would just go back to their lives. They didn't know Evelyn had set a bear trap. $150,000, Trent stammered. "We don't have that." "I know you don't," I said. "I saw your emails." "Trent." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Reyes said. "Given the video evidence I just saw, the likelihood of you proving incapacity is virtually zero. If you continue this lawsuit, your clients are walking into financial ruin. Do you wish to withdraw the petition?" Sterling looked at Trent. "We should pull out, right now, before a judgment is entered." "No," Trent hissed. "We can't. If we pull out, we get nothing. I need the money." "If you stay, you lose everything you have left," I said. "Including the house." Gwen let out a wail. "The house, Trent! What did you do?" "Quiet," Trent snapped at his mother. Judge Reyes held up a hand. "There is one more document here, a handwritten letter from the deceased. It was instructed to be read only in the event of a contest." Reyes picked up a piece of cream-colored stationery. "To those who are reading this," Reyes read aloud, "if you are hearing these words, it means my family has chosen to fight. It means they looked at my life's work and saw only a payday." I added the no contest clause not to be cruel, but to be a teacher. If they sue, it means they have chosen money over the truth. So, let the price of that choice be real. If they want to gamble with my legacy, let them put their own on the table. Perhaps, when the bill comes due, they will finally understand the value of what they destroyed. Judge Reyes lowered the letter. She looked at Trent with a mixture of pity and disgust. "She knew," Reyes said. "She knew exactly what you would do." Trent slumped in his chair. The fight had gone out of him. He wasn't a predator anymore. He was prey. "Ms. Thomas," Judge Reyes said, turning to me, I have a question before I render my final decision. Yes, Your Honor. Throughout this ordeal, Reyes said, her eyes softening slightly, you continued to work at a cafe, you allowed the previous court, and your family, to mock you. You are a highly skilled attorney. You could have taken a loan. You could have revealed your credentials on day one. Why did you wait? Why did you keep the apron? I stood up straight. I looked at the judge. Then I looked at the gallery. And finally, I looked at my mother and brother. Because, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, when you wear a suit, people treat you with a certain default respect. They assume you matter. But when you wear an apron, you see who people really are. I touched the rough fabric of my sleeve. My family, and the previous judge, didn't mock me because they thought I was bad at my job. They mocked me because they believed that serving others makes you less than. They believe dignity is something you buy, not something you possess. I kept the job because I wanted the court to see that. I wanted to prove that their contempt wasn't about my competence. It was about their character. I didn't work for tips, Your Honor. I worked for the truth. Judge Reyes nodded slowly. Point taken, Counselor, and powerfully made. She gathered her papers. The climax was here. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. I am ready to issue my ruling on the validity of the will, Reyes said. But before I do, Mr. Thomas, Trent looked up, his eyes hollow. Yes. I have the financial disclosures you filed with your initial petition, Reyes said. She picked up a sheet of paper. In this sworn affidavit, you claim to have 0 significant debts, making you a suitable candidate for administrator. She paused. The silence stretched out, thin and terrifying. However, Reyes continued, her eyes locking onto his like a laser. Ms. Thomas has submitted evidence suggesting you are currently facing a margin call on a leveraged account, a margin call that exceeds the value of your mother's home, Gwen gasped, clutching her chest. Trent, is that true? Trent didn't answer. He couldn't breathe. So, here is the question that will determine your future. Mr. Thomas, Judge Reyes said, leaning forward. Did you contest this will because you genuinely believed your aunt was incompetent? Or did you contest it because you committed perjury to use this court as a piggy bank to cover your gambling losses? The trap snapped shut. If he admitted the debt, he admitted to perjury and fraud. He would go to jail. If he denied the debt, he would lose the case anyway based on the video. And the no contest clause would bankrupt him, exposing the debt to his creditors immediately. He was buried. Trent opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He looked at me. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I just watched. Answer me, Mr. Thomas, Judge Reyes commanded. The truth has a bill, and it is time to pay it. Judge Reyes did not blink. The silence in the courtroom was not empty. It was heavy, filled with the suffocating weight of inevitable consequences. She leaned over the bench, her gaze pinning Trent to his chair like a specimen on a corkboard. I will ask you one last time, Mr. Thomas, Judge Reyes said, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. Do you have a single piece of concrete, admissible evidence that your aunt was coerced? Do you have a medical report? A witness who has not been discredited? Or do you simply have a photograph of an apron and your own sense of entitlement? Trent looked at his lawyer. Sterling. But Sterling was staring at his shoes, visibly distancing himself from the blast radius. Trent looked at Gwen, but she was clutching her chest, her face pale with the dawning realization of what his silence meant. Trent started, his voice cracking. It is not about the evidence. It is about what is right. It is family money. It belongs to us, to the people who know how to use it. How to use it, Judge Reyes repeated, raising an eyebrow. You mean, use it to pay off the margin call you denied having in your sworn affidavit? I had to, Trent shouted, snapping under the pressure. The veneer of the successful businessman shattered completely. The market turned on me. I just needed a bridge loan. Evelyn had millions sitting in low-yield bonds doing nothing. She was dead. She didn't need it. I need it. If I don't cover the position by Friday, they take the house. They take everything. The admission hung in the air, naked and ugly. Gwen let out a low, keen sound. The house. You said the house was safe. You said you leveraged the commercial properties. I lied, Trent screamed at her, his face blotchy and wet with sweat. I lied because you wouldn't give me the signature otherwise, but it doesn't matter now, does it? Because she stole it? He pointed a shaking finger at me. She stole my bailout. Judge Reyes banged her gavel. It wasn't a call for order. It was a period at the end of a sentence. Let the record show, Reyes said, her voice ice-cold, that the plaintiff has admitted in open court that his motivation for this contest was not a concern for the decedent's capacity, but a personal financial exigency resulting from his own mismanagement of funds. She turned her eyes to me. Ms. Thomas, she said, the court finds that the last will and testament of Evelyn Harrow is valid, rational, and executed with full testamentary capacity. The allegations of undue influence are dismissed with prejudice. She shifted her papers, the sound loud in the silent room. Furthermore, the court finds that this contest was brought in bad faith. Therefore, I am enforcing the no contest clause in its entirety. The plaintiff, Mr. Trent Thomas, and by extension, the co-plaintiff, Mrs. Gwendolyn Thomas, are hereby disinherited. They forfeit the $5,000 bequest. Trent slumped forward, burying his head in his hands, but Reyes was not done. Additionally, the judge continued, per the terms of the clause, the plaintiffs are ordered to reimburse the estate for all legal fees, court costs, and administrative expenses incurred during this litigation. I am also granting the defendant's motion for damages regarding the loss of value due to the asset freeze. The total judgment against the plaintiffs is set at $162,000, payable immediately. $160,000, Gwen whispered, horrified. We don't have that, if he loses the house. Then you will have to declare bankruptcy, Judge Reyes said, without a shred of pity. That is the cost of filing a frivolous lawsuit in my courtroom. She looked at Trent one last time. Mr. Thomas, I am also referring the transcript of this hearing to the District Attorney's Office for review regarding potential perjury charges related to your initial financial disclosures. You may step down. The gavel came down. Bang. It was over. The bailiff moved toward Trent, not to arrest him yet, but to ensure he didn't do anything rash. Sterling was already packing his briefcase, practically running for the door. I stood up. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Maya. You did it, she whispered. You buried them. No, I said, gathering my files. They buried themselves. I just handed them the shovel. We walked out of the courtroom and into the lobby. The air conditioning out here felt different. It felt like freedom. I was halfway to the exit when I heard the click-clack of heels behind me. Chloe. I stopped. I turned around. Gwen was running toward me. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was coming loose from its perfect bun, and her eyes were wild with desperation. She stopped a few feet away, reaching out as if to hug me, then dropping her hands when she saw the look on my face. Chloe, please, she begged. You have to stop this. You can waive the judgment. You are the executor. You can choose not to enforce the debt. Why would I do that? I asked calmly. Because we are family, Gwen cried, tears streaming down her face. Trent made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but if you make us pay that money, we will be on the street. They will take the house, my house, the house you grew up in. The house you told me to leave when I was 18 because I wasn't successful enough. I asked. I was trying to motivate you. Gwen sobbed. I always loved you. I was just hard on you because I wanted you to be tough. And look, you are a lawyer now. You are rich. You don't need the money. Just sign a paper. Forgive the debt. Please. Chloe, don't be cruel. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had sat in the front row and smiled when Judge Keene called me a waitress. I looked at the woman who had tried to trick me into signing away my rights because she thought I was too stupid to understand a trust document. "Do you remember the first hearing?" I asked her softly. Gwen blinked, confused. "What?" "The first hearing," I repeated. "When Judge Keene laughed at me, when he made jokes about my apron, when he humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers." "That was him," Gwen pleaded. "That wasn't us." "I watched you, Mother," I said. "I looked right at you, and you weren't horrified. You weren't defending me. You were laughing. You covered your mouth. But I saw your eyes. You were enjoying it. You chose to stand on the side of the laughter because you thought that was where the power was." I didn't." "You did," I said. "And now the power has shifted. I am not being cruel. I am simply letting you live with the consequences of the side you chose. You bet on Trent. You bet on the lie. And you lost." I turned my back on her. "Chloe," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I am your mother." "I know," I said without turning around. "That is why it is so tragic that I had to find a parent in a woman I wasn't even related to." I walked out the doors. The Texas sun hit my face, bright and warm. I took a deep breath. It smelled of ozone and hot pavement. It smelled like the truth. I didn't see Trent again. I heard later that Rourke had dropped him as a client the moment he left the building, and the district attorney had indeed opened an investigation into his financial disclosures. He was facing felony perjury charges. The house was foreclosed on 3 weeks later. Gwen moved into a small apartment in a neighboring town, presumably living off her Social Security, but I didn't dwell on their fate. I had work to do. 2 nights later, I sat on the porch of the ranch house in the hill country. It was my house now. The stars were out. A vast canopy of diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. I opened the last envelope Evelyn had left for me. It was handwritten on her personal stationery. The ink was slightly shaky, written in her final days. "My dearest Chloe, if you are reading this, the dust has settled. I hope you didn't go too easy on them. But knowing you, you were fair, which is more than they deserved. I want to tell you one last thing. Throughout your life, people will try to put you in a box. They will look at your gender, or your background, or your clothes, and they will decide who you are before you even speak. They will call you a waitress. They will call you assistant. They will call you lucky. Let them call you a waitress by those who are terrified of your intellect. Let them underestimate you. It is the greatest advantage a woman can have, because while they are busy looking down on you, they never see the blade coming until it is already against their throat. You were never just a waitress to me. You were the daughter I never had. Now, go do something good with it. Make sure the next girl in the apron doesn't have to fight alone. Love, Evelyn. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. A single tear rolled down my cheek, hot and cleansing. 30 days later, I walked into the lobby of the Northline Harbor Attorneys. It was a boutique firm, small but fierce, specializing in plaintiff litigation. I wasn't there for an interview. I was there to sign the partnership agreement. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Thomas," the senior partner said, shaking my hand. "We are excited to have you. Your handling of the Harrow case it is already being taught in law school seminars as a masterclass in probate defense." "I am happy to be here," I said, "but the terms we discussed regarding my pro bono hours—" "Agreed," he said. 20 hours a week. It is unprecedented. But for you, we will make it work." I smiled. "Thank you." But my real work wasn't in the high-rise office. That afternoon, I drove to the University District. I parked in front of a familiar brick building. The sign out front had been freshly painted. Juniper Oak Cafe. I walked inside. Sarah was behind the counter. When she saw me, she practically vaulted over the espresso machine to hug me. "I still can't believe you bought the building," she squealed. "You are my landlord. Does this mean I get a rent freeze?" "It means you own the business." "Sarah," I said, handing her a folder. "I bought the building, you own the cafe, rent-free for 5 years. Just keep making that oat milk latte." Sarah started crying. Chloe, why? Because you gave me a job when no one else would, I said, and because I need a tenant for the upstairs unit who won't mind the foot traffic. The upstairs unit? Sarah wiped her eyes. What are you putting up there? Come look, I said. We walked up the narrow staircase. I opened the door to the second floor. It had been renovated. The old storage room was gone. In its place was a reception desk, 3 small consultation offices, and a waiting room filled with comfortable chairs. On the wall, a bronze plaque gleamed under the track lighting. The Evelyn Harrow Legal Clinic, pro bono representation for workers and families. It is for them, I told Sarah, looking around the space. For the waitresses who get fired for being sick, for the construction workers whose bosses steal their wages, for the families who get bullied by people like Trent. I am going to run it in the evenings and weekends, free of charge. You are going to be tired, Sarah said, smiling. I am used to being tired, I said. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I saw a young woman walking by, wearing a black apron, looking exhausted, counting her tips as she walked to the bus stop. I knew exactly how her feet felt. I knew exactly how heavy that apron was. I didn't win because they looked down on me, I said, more to myself than to Sarah. I didn't win because I was smarter, or because I had a better degree. I won because they looked at the world and saw only what they could take. I looked at the world and saw what needed to be protected. I turned back to the room, ready to get to work. They thought the apron was a costume, I said. They forgot that it is a uniform, and the thing about service is we always settle the check. I smiled. And the truth always has a bill to pay. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Chloe's journey reminded you that no matter how much people underestimate you, your worth is never defined by their opinion. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving to work in London? Or maybe cooking dinner in Sydney? Or relaxing in New York? Please drop a comment below and tell me your location and what you thought of Chloe's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to support the content, and smash the hype button so we can get this story out to more people who need to hear it. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next story.